Good evening and welcome to another Facebook Live session. If you're watching this on catch-up, I apologise in advance for all the random hellos and whatever you say. You'll be able to watch this at any point in the cave under invisibility cloak. Although the point of telling you that at the start of a video, when you haven't actually found the video on how to find the video, might be a little bit wasted. But anyway, I'm going to try something a little differently today. So what I'm going to do is what I'll normally try and do is I try and talk a little bit before we get into the task in the real content, because that gives people a chance to join. And hopefully we'll have a few people joining, because me working through this exercise without anybody else here could be a little challenging. So, no point doing a warning because there's nobody on yet. But so what we're going to do today is we're going to work with the concept of how you see yourself. And let's start off by explaining a few emotions that actually are not possible unless there is an external stimulus of some sort. So, for example, embarrassment. You cannot be embarrassed unless there is something that embarrasses you, i.e. somebody there to measure how you feel about what's going on. So you can't be embarrassed purely internally as you sit there in the chair or wherever you're sitting or standing or whatever. Embarrassment requires some perception of what other people think and then some measure of how you are against that. So the challenges that we have with the way we feel about ourselves come from our perceptions of what other people think of us. So maybe it's a fear of failure, a perception of what other people will think. We're not good enough, we don't know our stuff, we'll be found out. It could be a perception of how you look, somebody saying you look fat, you look skinny, you've got a funny nose, whatever it is. A lot of the problems we have about the way we feel about ourselves come from the way we measure ourselves up against others. And so that can cause us a problem. So in this Facebook Live session, what I want to do is I want to teach you to build your own invisibility cloak. It's a very simple technique, but the basic principle is you build a positive invisibility cloak. So there's two types. There's a negative invisibility cloak where you don't think anybody sees you and it's really frustrating. Nobody takes you seriously, nobody listens to you. Well, there's no real value in building something like that. This one is a positive invisibility cloak, so that you can feel you don't have to measure yourself by other people's opinions. Now, as we go through this, hello, oh, you're over in America. What time is it over there, Valerie? As we go through this, there is a little document, and I posted a link in the cave a little bit earlier. So if you can go fetch the document, it's a fillable PDF, so you can actually fill it in online if you can work out how to do that without hanging up. I have it here. So what I'm actually going to do is, those of you who are connected, who are live, who are with me, I'm going to actually ask you to go through this exercise and do this while we talk. Those of you who are watching up on the catch-up later, it depends when you're watching it. There is a link to a document in this folder, and that link will allow you to go through this exercise while I talk you through it and fill it in and do it. And the nice thing about this exercise is you can do it at any point. If you find you're getting stuck, you can do it on yourself, and it just kind of gets you unstuck. Bit of a word of warning: if you find as we go through this that we're going somewhere that you really don't want to go, then stop. So this is in your control. You might find that it's highlighted something that you need a bit of help with. You can come to me or go somewhere else for that help. But this is kind of a high level thing. So 7 hours behind. All right. Okay, cool. So it's not too late for you. That's cool. So told you I'd have random conversations as we're doing this. So what we have is a document which has a series of steps in it. I'm just going to talk you through these steps. I've realized there was one kind of missing, so I'll try and update the document. And the idea is, imagine that you have an invisibility cloak on and nobody can see you. How many of the problems that you are concerned about, how many of the limiting beliefs are still true if people can't see you? If you're stood up in front of a room full of people talking, how many of the things that you worry about with that room full of people would you worry about if they couldn't actually see you or even, register what you were saying? Obviously, that's going to be a bit weird. If you walk into a room full of people, let's say you go to a wedding or a party or a reunion or anything like that, if you were wearing an invisibility cloak, how many worries about the way you looked would you actually have? So this exercise is building what's called an anchor, and an anchor to give you an invisibility cloak. So I'm going to talk you through it. You can go through it with me. You can ask questions as we go along if you're online live. If you're not online live, just comment afterwards and we'll see how it goes. So the first thing I want you to do, those of you who are listening, I want you to imagine if you were to stand in front of a room full of people right now, how would you feel? What would be the word that comes to mind? Now, really important when we do this is you say the very first thing that comes into your mind. Whatever it is, don't worry about it, because that's your subconscious, and it's your subconscious that gets in the way. So say the first thing that comes into your mind. What's the first thing you would feel when you're stood in front of a room full of people? So let me say nervous. Why would you feel that way? Why would you feel nervous? What's the worst thing that could happen? If you were to kind of go with the flow on your subconscious and take the very worst thing that could happen, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? So if you're trembling, if you're nervous, because why? What's the worst thing this room full of people could do? You'd be embarrassed. They're going to laugh at you. You're going to feel like a fraud or an imposter. You're going to think they're all judging you. Whatever it happens to be, it doesn't really matter. I want you to go below that first thing and say, underneath that, what's the risk here? What's the thing I'm scared about? Because that's what your subconscious is trying to protect you from. Now, the thing we have to remember is that we're all made up of multiple parts. We all think we're one kind of, there's some utopian version of us, this perfect us that has all their stuff together and can handle anything. But that person doesn't exist. All we are is a series of different parts that behave differently in different circumstances. So when you're in front of a room full of people, there is a part of you that interacts with that room full of people. When you're not in a room full of people, when you're one-to-one, that part of you is not present, but another one is. When you're being a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, a friend, at work, these are all different parts of you. And all these different parts have a job to do. They're looking after you in different ways. So they each have their own strengths, and they each have their own weaknesses and insecurities. And there's a mantra which I've said in previous videos that it's really important to remember as we go through this. All behavior serves a purpose. All behavior has a positive intent. Even if you can't realize why it is, there is a purpose. So this part of you that's here when you stand in front of a room full of people, that makes you tremble, that makes you nervous, that is worried that you're going to be found out, look stupid, embarrass yourself, stumble over your words, whatever it happens to be, that everybody's going to think you're fat, everybody's going to think you're skinny, everybody's going to think something. This part of you, this is the defensive part of you that we're working on. Because this part of you thinks that that risk from these feelings is that you're going to die. That's the way your subconscious works. If something hurts you, it kills you. Let's not let you die. So we'll protect you from this. So it will do whatever is necessary to try and keep you from that environment. So this part of you that's nervous, this part of you that's worried about being embarrassed, this emotion that we're talking about here, if you were to think where in your body that lived, where would you point? Is it in your gut? Is it in your head? If it's in your head, is it the front? Is it the back? She says, pointing at the middle. Duh. Is it your whole head? Give a little thought to that feeling. Where's that feeling? Where does it sit in my body? Okay, now we have a feeling and we have a place. So we're starting to construct our part. Our part is starting to gain substance. So we're going to talk to this part in a moment. This is where it gets weird. Go with the weird. So if we're going to talk to that part, so we're going to go with Valerie's example because she's joining in like a good one. So we had a trembling feeling and it's in her tummy. So I want you to ask that part kind of in your head, what should we call it? Bob, tremble, terrified, happy, daft, Jill, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Whatever comes to mind, we need a name for this part because this is the part of you that is trying to protect you from something, and that's the part that we need to get to back off a little. And that's the point of this exercise. So this part of you, what's it protecting you from? What is the intent? So what would happen if that part of you didn't step in these situations? What would happen if this part of you didn't make you feel this way, if it didn't protect you from these feelings? What would go wrong? So very often, if it doesn't protect you from that, then people might be mean to you. And if people are mean to you, you'll hate yourself. And it doesn't want you to hate yourself because that sucks. So it stops you going into situations where you're worried about people being mean to you. It might be that you're worried about being made an idiot of, and this part of you wants you to feel like you're not an idiot, so it won't put you in a situation where you can risk being made to feel like an idiot. Either way, all behavior has a purpose and all behavior has a positive intent. It is trying to protect you. Even though sometimes when we do this exercise, people come up with, oh, it's just being mean to me. It's not. Never is. The part is trying to help you. It thinks if it doesn't step in, if it doesn't take over, then dire consequences will happen. You know, we're doomed. This part doesn't take over. So this is what this part is trying to do for you. So we've got this part of us. We know what it's called. We know where it is in our body, and we know what emotion it represents. Now we need to work out when this part of you first moved in. When did it first become part of you? So if you were to allow, if you focus on that part of you for a moment and you just travel through time, keep on thinking, was it there then? Was it there then? Was it there before I was 5? Was it there between when I was 5 and 10? Was it there after I was 10? At which age was this part of me first there? When was I first aware of it? And just do a test before and after, before and after, before and after. Right, there it was, because you will zoom in on a particular memory. There will be a moment in time where something happened, where this part of you was born. It went, whoa, this is a thing I need to protect you from. We're not going to have this happen in the future. Here I am. I got your back. I'll be here forever now. And that's what happened in that moment. But what we know is this belief that this part had at the point at which it came into being was wrong. It came into being to protect you. Well, it came into being to protect you from something when you were a kid. And by the way, you're not a kid anymore. You're here listening to me. So whatever it thought was true then is not true now. And also, it was using kid logic, kid understanding to say that this was going to hurt you, this was a risk. And it wasn't. When we look back on it as adults, it wasn't how you thought it was at all. So that's the next thing I want you to do. I want you to think back to this, where you're looking as a fly on a wall, and look at the feeling that you had. What was that feeling called? Was it the same as the one we started with, or was it something slightly different? And before we do anything else, what we need to do is we need to just separate you out from this part and this memory for a moment. So imagine it's playing on a TV screen or something like that. And surround yourself in something, this younger version of you, surround them in something that makes them feel safe. It can be a blanket. It can be an invisibility cloak. They can be very useful. But blankets are also good. Bubbles are good. Bubble wrap. I've had Zorbs, all sorts. It doesn't really matter, you know, the big things that you roll around in for fun. That could be anything, really. So it doesn't matter. Whatever you surround yourself in something that makes you feel safe. Because the next thing that we need to do is, from that safe place, we need to point out a few things to this part. We need to point out that it was wrong. It means well, and we appreciate what it's done, but it was wrong. You didn't need protecting. Because there are a few things that are true. Number one, you can't read other people's minds, so you don't know what anybody else was thinking. But what you do know is we're all screwed up. We all have a subconscious in charge 90% of the time. That's got parts involved that are making us do all sorts of crazy things that are not actually necessary. So what you do know is whoever else was in this situation, it was not about you, it was about them. Whatever you thought was directed at you, it wasn't. It was about them and their screw-ups. And because you can't read mind, you don't know that that's true. But we can tell this younger version of you that that's true while they're safe. You can't read minds, they're screwed up. It was about them. It maybe you put somebody else different in that situation, they wouldn't have acted the same way. So this part that's protecting you didn't actually need to protect you. And apart from anything else, you're fine because you're here talking to me, so we know everything's okay. So, because this was a miscalculation, we need to change something about the way you remember that so that you don't take on board. And this is the trickiest bit, because this is one where I'm kind of guiding you online to do. And this is probably one of the hardest things to do, but we need to change something. So things that you can change somebody's voice so they sound really silly. Silly voices include Donald Duck, Minnie Mouse, Minions are good because they don't even make sense. Like you breathe in a helium balloon, or whatever, doesn't really matter. If you are dealing with a large audience, you can change the audience. So you can make them all into comic strips. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can make it black and white, you can make it different colors, you can give them all bright red noses, you can do anything that you want to do because you're safe in whatever you've got around you. So Caroline, it's I don't know whether you were on right from the start, but you kind of need to go through the steps to get to that moment. You also need to trust the thing that pops into your head. There are approximately 7,363,228 minutes that you experience by the time you're 14 years old. So when we start talking about this worry you have in front of other people, when we start tapping into that emotion, whatever comes to mind, it's connected in some way. That comes to mind of the 7 million odd moments that could have. There's a reason. So the trick with this is to trust in that moment that comes to mind, that memory that comes into mind, zoom in on it, and then do these changes to it. The trick is to remember that you're safe and you're going to be fine. The trick is to change it in some way, and it really doesn't matter, because I can guarantee it's not the way you remembered it. One of the first things I can pretty much guarantee is that whoever else was in that memory doesn't remember it. Most people don't remember the same significant things as you do. So if you're in front of the school and you're doing a school play, then nobody in school remembers that because they're only thinking about themselves, because that's what we don't realize. Everybody's just thinking about themselves. In a school play, you've got a load of other kids who are just kind of bored or maybe having a moment of laughter, but they're really not thinking about you and they really couldn't care less. And even if they did laugh because you did something daft that you didn't mean to do, they still wouldn't remember it. So that's the interesting thing, is we remember things as significant that weren't to everybody else. And because that is true, because none of our memories are true or false, why keep hold of something that is causing you damage? If it was never true in the first place, why do you need to remember it? Why does it need to be that part of you that protects you? You don't need protecting. You never did. You were fine. So the way we get your brain to update that is to just change it. Change the way it's stored. If you change even the color of a wallpaper in a memory, the way your brain works is it goes, oh, the wall wasn't the color I remembered it, so that can't have been true, and that can't have been true, and it's the structure that collapses. So if this memory was not as you originally thought it was, didn't have the meaning, what happened, happened, but the meaning is the problem, then this part of you didn't need to protect you from getting hurt in that moment, and if it doesn't need to protect you from getting hurt, it can back off. So we change anything we can about that moment. Zoom in, zoom out, change words, muffle people's voices, make yourself awesome, have a laugh. Whatever you do, we need to check that the person, this younger version of you in this memory, is now feeling either neutral or a positive emotion, right? So looking back at this younger version of you, if it's 7 or whatever it is, whatever changes you've made, make sure this younger version of you is just either or giggling. Giggling's also good. And then whatever you wrapped yourself in to make yourself feel safe, just reinforce that with this good feeling. Just add this good feeling. And if it was like bubble wrap, it might get more bubbles. If it was blankets, it could get fluffier or bigger or change color. Doesn't really matter, because you can't unthink something. If I say don't think of a pink elephant, you're all now thinking of pink elephants. Or you're thinking of blue elephants because you're trying to prove me wrong, but you're not able to think of nothing. And that's the interesting thing. So any change you make, even at a concept level, be as creative as you want, because what is true is the meaning that you had in this memory is not true. And even if it was true, you're fine. You're okay, you're here. So this part of you needs to back off. So once you've changed all of that and you're feeling more positive, I want you to store that thing in your head that you wrapped around yourself. Whatever it happens to be, just store it in your head nice and safe, because you might be able to use it later. And then I want you to kind of come back to here, talking to me, to the age that you are now. And I want you to reconnect with that part of you. Now, that part of you will probably already have changed, but it's not entirely sure how to be different yet. That part of you only knows that what it's been doing its whole life is not really what it needed to do. So it's going to feel a wee bit lost. So the first thing you need to do is you need to wrap it in that thing that you had in your head. So take the thing out your head, wrap it around it to make it feel safe, to make it feel okay, to remind it that you can't read minds and everybody's screwed up. So if you were to wrap both of you in this thing and you look out at any situation with anybody, what you know is, it doesn't matter. Everybody's in their own little head, in their own little world, sorting out their own problems, and there's nothing you can do about that. You're neither powerful enough nor significant enough for them to change everything in their life. You can't upset somebody because you can only say something and they can choose to be upset by their own pattern matching. You can't annoy somebody. You know, some people you'll say things to and they'll really wind them up, and other people it doesn't wind them up. Everybody's different. And you have no control over everybody's differences. You only have control over being okay with who you are. So this part of you, we need to move it from wherever it is. So if it was in your tummy, we need to change the dynamics of it in the tummy. With this kind of wrap thing, we need to move it maybe more to your head or a different part of you so that it kind of supports rather than hold you back. That's also tricky to do. And it's very tricky for me to explain this to you because I have no idea what's going on apart from you, Valerie, who's been brilliant in telling me what's going on. So you're going to have to just work with me on this one a little bit. You do have the steps to go through. I missed out the bit where you change it. So I'm going to have to update the document and upload that. But remember, even with this part behaving differently, or at least seeing that the world isn't as it thought it was, you still have other parts. Have loads of other parts for loads of different situations. You'll have a go-getting part. You'll have a part that's on the call now with me, wanting to change. And very often the problems we have are not about the individual parts and what they do, but battles between the different ones. So you can do this exercise with the go-getting part. You can do this exercise with a part that stops you doing work that you need to do, that takes things personally when they say them. It doesn't really matter. They're just parts. So we have these conversations in our head. Oh, there's a part of me that really doesn't want to drink as much coffee, but you know what? I'm just drinking it anyway. Or there's a part of me that wants to go to the gym, and there's another part of me that just wants to stay in bed. We talk in parts all the time. We just don't realize it. And then when you suggest to people that they're made up of parts, they go, oh, I'm not schizophrenic. Nah, everybody's schizophrenic on that basis. We're all made up of parts. And the problems we have in life is when the parts come into conflict. Because those parts just cohabit most of the time normally. It's when you can't do something, when you're worried about something, when you have anxiety, when you have depression, when you have addictions, when you have anything. It's usually because there's parts of you in conflict and there's a part of you trying to protect you from some invisible saber-toothed tiger. So you protect yourself. And the first starting point is, if I was in an invisibility cloak right now, would these things still be true? Would I still be worried about this stuff? And honestly, really honestly ask yourself that, because most of the time the answer is going to be, actually, if nobody could see me, this wouldn't matter. If nobody was affected by what I did, this wouldn't matter. And then you just have to go track your part back, work out where it came from, and get it to realize that it doesn't need to be quite so defensive in the future. And that will make less resistance and allow you to make your own choices a little bit more. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. I have a tendency to waffle on at the end of these things, so I'm going to try and not waffle because I know a bunch of people will probably watch the video afterwards and go through the video afterwards, and they're not going to want a whole bunch of me waffling at the end. So if you've got any questions, you can either comment on this video, you can message me through my Think It Change It page, or you can drop me an email. If you find that the hardest thing about this is changing your own subconscious is really tricky, because you need your thinking brain to change your non-thinking brain. But when you're engaged with your non-thinking brain, your thinking brain is disengaged. So, see, I imagined audiences with red noses as well. You can do anything. It's great. And the minute it's changed, it changes the fundamental way it's stored in your brain. I mean, it really changes the way it's stored. So it will have a longer effect. But if you feel there's something a bit bigger that we need to deal with, get in touch. If you're struggling, get in touch. Otherwise, just have a bit of fun with it. This is just about making your life a wee bit easier, and giving you something very practical that you can do for yourself to do that. So have fun with it. Keep me posted. Feel free to share what you've done. I would love to read what you've done in here. And thanks, Valerie, for being my guinea pig as we went through that. Couldn't have set it up better myself. And hopefully I'll talk to you all again soon. If you have ideas for Facebook Live things that you would like me to do, feel free to post in the cave, and I'll try and do these as regularly as I can based on ideas I've got and things like that. So thank you for engaging. You have a great evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you are in the world, and I will catch up with you all again soon.